The colors of courage. Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and of good courage. Do not fear nor be afraid of them. For the Lord your God, He is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Chapter 1. The Aftermath. Rachel sat on the edge of her bed in her small, dimly lit apartment in Seattle, her gaze fixed on the peeling paint of the ceiling above her. The city outside buzzed with life, a stark contrast to the isolation she felt within those four walls. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee from the cafe down the street and the faint echo of her own heartbeat, a reminder of the loneliness that enveloped her like a heavy blanket. Just a few months ago, Rachel had been riding high. She had a promising career in corporate marketing, a fiancé who adored her, and dreams that seemed just within reach. But all of that had crumbled in an instant. Downsizing had swept through her company like a storm, leaving her and dozens of others in its wake. The loss of her job had been a blow, but it was the subsequent departure of her fiancé that had shattered her spirit. With each passing day, the weight of her circumstances pressed down harder, suffocating the remnants of her hope. Now she found herself in a cheap apartment, working as a barista at a local coffee shop. The job was a far cry from the conference rooms and strategy meetings she had once thrived in. Instead, she spent her days steaming milk and serving lattes to customers who barely glanced her way. Each shift felt like a reminder of how far she had fallen, and the clinking of cups and the hum of conversation only amplified her sense of isolation. As Rachel prepared for another day at the coffee shop, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The reflection staring back at her was one she barely recognized. Disheveled hair, dark circles under her eyes, and a look of defeat that seemed etched into her features. She sighed, pulling her hair back into a messy bun, trying to shake off the feeling of despair that clung to her. The morning shift dragged on, the hours blending into one another as she mechanically took orders and crafted drinks. The cafe was filled with the usual crowd, students tapping away on laptops, parents chatting over pastries, and couples sharing quiet moments. But amidst the chatter and laughter, Rachel felt like an outsider looking in, trapped in her own world of sorrow. During a brief lull, Rachel's best friend Lily burst through the door, her bright smile cutting through the gloom like a ray of sunshine. Lily's energy was infectious, and Rachel couldn't help but feel a flicker of warmth at her presence. "Hey you!" Lily exclaimed, wrapping Rachel in a tight hug. "How are you holding up?" Rachel forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm surviving, I guess. Just trying to get through each day." Lily's expression softened. "You know, I've been thinking about you a lot. I know things are tough right now, but I want you to remember something important." Rachel raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "What's that?" Lily leaned in closer, her voice earnest. "You're stronger than you think. You've always been strong. You just need to tap into that strength again." Rachel shrugged, the weight of her doubts pressing down on her. "It's hard to feel strong when everything feels so broken. I just don't know how to move forward." Lily reached across the table, her hand resting on Rachel's. "You're not alone in this. You have me, and you have God. Remember what we used to talk about. He's with you, even in the darkest moments." Rachel's heart sank at the mention of faith. She had once held her beliefs close, a source of comfort and guidance. But now, in the midst of her struggles, she felt abandoned, as if the very foundation of her faith had crumbled alongside her dreams. "I don't know, Lily. It's hard to believe that when everything feels so hopeless." Lily's eyes sparkled with determination. "You have to hold on to hope, Rachel. It's what will guide you through this. You can't let fear win." As the conversation continued, Rachel listened, but a part of her remained distant, trapped in a spiral of self-doubt. She appreciated Lily's encouragement, but the shadows of her circumstances loomed large, blocking out any light of hope. When Lily finally left, Rachel returned to her duties, the cafe buzzing with life around her. But inside, she felt like a ghost, wandering through a world that no longer felt like her own. The laughter and chatter faded into a dull roar, and she found herself retreating into her thoughts, battling the fear that threatened to consume her. That night, as she lay in bed, Rachel stared at the ceiling once more, the darkness pressing in on her. She felt lost, abandoned, and utterly alone. The future stretched out before her like an endless void, and the thought of facing it filled her with dread. "Where are you, God?" she whispered into the silence, her voice barely audible. "Why have you left me in this mess?" Tears slipped down her cheeks as she closed her eyes, longing for a sign, a whisper of reassurance that she was not alone. But all she felt was the weight of her despair, and as sleep finally claimed her, Rachel wondered if she would ever find the strength to rise from the ashes of her shattered life. Chapter 2. Facing the Past. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of Rachel's apartment, casting a soft glow over the cluttered space. Rachel stirred awake, the remnants of her dreams fading like wisps of smoke. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, the weight of yesterday's emotions still heavy on her chest. As she shuffled to the kitchen to brew her morning coffee, her phone buzzed on the counter, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a notification from the local post office, and she frowned as she opened the message. A letter had arrived for her, and her heart sank at the thought of more bad news. She had been avoiding any correspondence that might remind her of her current situation. With a sigh, Rachel poured herself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the air. She took a moment to gather her thoughts before opening the letter. The envelope was worn and yellowed, a stark contrast to the pristine white of her corporate correspondence from just months ago. As she tore it open, a sense of foreboding washed over her. The letter was from the bank, notifying her that her childhood home, the house she had inherited after her mother's passing, was facing foreclosure. The words blurred together as she read through the details, her heart racing with panic. The home had been left vacant since her mother's death, a painful reminder of all that she had lost. Rachel had avoided dealing with it, hoping that time would somehow heal the wounds associated with it. But now, the reality of the situation hit her like a tidal wave. "Rachel, you need to take action," she muttered to herself, her voice shaking. The thought of returning to that house filled her with dread. Memories of her mother's warm embrace and the laughter that once echoed through the halls clashed with the painful recollections of her father's abandonment. He had left when she was a teenager, a wound that had never truly healed. As she stood in her kitchen, the weight of the letter felt like a boulder pressing down on her chest. She had been running from her past, but now it was demanding her attention. The prospect of facing her childhood home, now a shell of its former self, filled her with a mix of fear and resentment. Later that day, while working her shift at the coffee shop, Rachel felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She mechanically prepared drinks, but her mind was elsewhere, swirling with thoughts of the house and the memories it held. "Hey, you okay?" Sam, her coworker, asked, noticing her distracted demeanor. He was a kind soul, always quick to lend an ear or share a laugh. Rachel forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just dealing with some stuff," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam studied her for a moment, his brow furrowing with concern. I've been through my own share of struggles. When I lost everything a few years back, I had to learn to lean on something greater than myself. It made all the difference." Rachel looked at him, intrigued despite herself. "What do you mean?" He leaned against the counter, his expression earnest. "I had to face my past and all the pain that came with it. It wasn't easy, but I found strength in my faith. It helped me find my way back when I thought I was lost." Rachel felt a flicker of interest ignite within her, but skepticism quickly followed. "It's hard to believe that when everything feels so hopeless," she admitted, her voice tinged with bitterness. Sam nodded, understanding her struggle. "I get it. But you have to confront your fears, Rachel. You can't run from your past forever. It'll catch up with you, and when it does, you need to be ready to face it." His words resonated with her, but the thought of returning to her childhood home felt insurmountable. The memories were too raw, too painful. "I don't know if I can do that," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Maybe it's time to try," Sam said gently. "You might be surprised by what you find." Sometimes, facing the past can lead to healing. As Rachel continued her shift, Sam's words echoed in her mind, mingling with the anxiety that had settled in her chest. The looming foreclosure was a reminder that she couldn't avoid her past any longer. She needed to confront the house, the memories, and the unresolved feelings that had haunted her for too long. That evening, as she sat on her bed, the letter from the bank lay open on her lap. The reality of her situation felt suffocating. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The thought of facing her childhood home filled her with dread, but she knew she had to do it. Rachel closed her eyes, envisioning the house, the creaky front door, the faded wallpaper, the garden her mother had lovingly tended. It was a place of both joy and sorrow, a symbol of her past that she could no longer ignore. With a newfound determination, she picked up her phone and dialed the number for the bank. It was time to take the first step, no matter how daunting it felt. As she waited for someone to answer, she felt a flicker of courage ignite within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, facing her past would lead her to the strength she so desperately needed. Chapter 3. The Black Moment begins. The day Rachel had dreaded had finally arrived. She stood outside the weathered front door of her childhood home, her heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. The house loomed before her, a ghost of the vibrant place it once was. Once filled with laughter and love, it now felt like a mausoleum, a reminder of everything she had lost. Taking a deep breath, Rachel pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The familiar scent of aged wood and dust hit her like a wave, pulling her back to a time when this house had felt like a sanctuary. She stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight, and paused, allowing the memories to wash over her. The living room was just as she remembered it. Faded floral wallpaper, a worn-out couch, and family photos lining the walls. But now, the colors seemed muted, the warmth replaced by a chilling emptiness. Rachel felt a lump form in her throat as she walked further in, her fingers brushing against the surfaces that had once been filled with life. As she moved through the house, each room held a different memory. The kitchen where her mother had baked cookies on rainy afternoons, the dining room where they had shared countless meals, and her bedroom, where she had spent countless hours dreaming of the future. But now, all she could feel was the weight of her father's absence, a shadow that darkened every corner of her mind. Rachel stepped into her old bedroom, the walls still adorned with posters of her favorite bands, and the shelf lined with trophies from her school days. She felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with bitterness. How had everything changed so drastically? How had she gone from a bright-eyed girl with dreams to a woman paralyzed by fear and uncertainty? As she began to sift through the remnants of her past, Rachel stumbled upon a dusty box tucked away in the corner of her closet. Curiosity piqued. She pulled it out and opened the lid. Inside lay a collection of letters, their edges yellowed with age. Her heart raced as she recognized her father's handwriting, the letters he had written but never sent. With trembling hands, Rachel pulled out one of the letters and began to read. The words flowed like a river of emotion, revealing her father's struggles and regrets. He wrote about his love for her and her mother, his desire to be a better man, and the pain of leaving them behind. But as she read, anger bubbled to the surface. How could he say these things now, after all these years? Why hadn't he fought to stay? Tears streamed down Rachel's cheeks as she continued to read, each letter unraveling the tightly wound ball of resentment in her heart. Her father's words were filled with longing and sorrow, but they did little to ease the ache of abandonment. She felt trapped in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, anger, sadness, and a desperate longing for closure. As she reached the last letter, Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The final words were a plea for forgiveness, a hope that one day she would understand why he had left. But all Rachel could feel was the weight of betrayal. How could she forgive someone who had walked away when she needed him the most? In a fit of rage, she crumpled the letter in her hand and shouted into the empty room, "Why did you leave us?" Her voice echoed off the walls, a haunting reminder of her pain. The house felt oppressive, the memories closing in around her like a vice. Rachel sank to the floor, the letters scattered around her like fallen leaves. She felt suffocated by her emotions, the anger and hurt crashing over her in waves. It was as if the walls were closing in, trapping her in a cycle of grief she couldn't escape. In that moment, Rachel considered walking away from it all. Her past, her home, and even her faith. She felt like she couldn't bear the weight of it any longer. The thought of reconciling with her father, of facing the memories that haunted her, felt impossible. God, "Where are you?" she cried out, her voice breaking. "Why have you abandoned me too?" The silence that followed was deafening, amplifying her sense of isolation. As she sat there, surrounded by the remnants of her childhood, Rachel felt as though she was drowning in despair. The memories of her father's absence and her mother's death loomed large, and she couldn't see a way forward. The courage to face her past seemed to slip further away, leaving her feeling more lost than ever. In that dark moment, Rachel felt the weight of her fears pressing down on her, suffocating her spirit. She had come to confront her past, but instead, she found herself engulfed in it, unable to escape the pain that had defined her life for so long. As tears streamed down her face, Rachel realized that she had a choice to make: to let the darkness consume her, or to find a way to rise from the ashes of her shattered dreams. But in that moment, she felt utterly powerless, trapped in a cycle of grief that seemed never-ending. Chapter 4: A Breakdown and a Revelation. The days that followed Rachel's visit to her childhood home were a blur of emotions, each one more turbulent than the last. She found herself caught in a cycle of anger and despair, unable to shake the memories of her father's letters and the pain they had unearthed. Each night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moments of her past and the choices that had led her to this point. Rachel's shifts at the coffee shop became a refuge, a place where she could lose herself in the rhythm of making drinks and serving customers. But even there, the weight of her emotions loomed large. She felt like a ghost, moving through life without truly engaging with it. Her laughter with Sam felt forced, her smiles practiced. The darkness that had settled in her heart felt inescapable. One evening, after a particularly long shift, Rachel returned home feeling more exhausted than usual. As she flopped onto her bed, she felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had tried to push through her pain, to find a semblance of normalcy, but the effort felt futile. The memories of her father's abandonment gnawed at her, and the weight of her unresolved feelings pressed down harder than ever. Just then, her phone buzzed with a text from Lily, asking if they could meet up. Rachel hesitated, the thought of facing her friend feeling overwhelming, but she knew she couldn't keep hiding. With a resigned sigh, she replied, agreeing to meet at their favorite diner. When Rachel arrived, she found Lily already seated in a booth, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Hey," Lily said, her voice warm but firm. "I've been worried about you." Rachel forced a smile as she slid into the seat across from her. "I'm fine. Just busy with work." Lily raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "You're not fine, Rachel. I can see it in your eyes. You look exhausted. What's really going on?" Rachel opened her mouth to respond but found the words stuck in her throat. The floodgates threatened to burst open, and before she knew it, she was spilling everything: the letters, the memories, the anger she felt toward her father, and the suffocating weight of her grief. "I just don't understand how he could leave us," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "How could he walk away and then write letters filled with regret? It feels so selfish. I don't know how to forgive him." Lily listened intently, her eyes filled with empathy. "It's okay to feel angry, Rachel. You've been through so much. But holding on to that anger is only going to hurt you in the long run." Rachel shook her head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "But how can I let it go? It feels like if I forgive him, I'm saying that what he did was okay. I can't just forget the pain he caused." Lily reached across the table, her hand resting gently on Rachel's. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing someone's behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of that pain. It's about choosing to let go for your own sake. Rachel felt tears prick at her eyes, the weight of her emotions threatening to spill over. "I don't know if I can do that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I feel so abandoned and alone. It's like God has left me too." The words hung heavy in the air, and Rachel felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her. She had been holding on to her pain for so long, and now it felt like a dam had broken. The tears flowed freely, and she couldn't stop them. Lily's expression softened as she leaned closer. "You're not alone, Rachel. You have me, and you have God. I know it feels dark right now, but He's with you, even when it doesn't feel like it." Rachel shook her head, her heart aching. "I don't know if I believe that anymore. I feel so lost." In that moment, the anger and despair that had been building inside her erupted. "Why did you let this happen, God? Why did you let my father leave? Why did you take my mother away? I'm so tired of feeling abandoned." Her voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby diners, but she didn't care. The release felt cathartic, even if it was painful. Lily watched her with a mixture of concern and compassion. "It's okay to be angry. It's okay to question. But don't let that anger turn you away from him. He wants to walk with you through this pain." Rachel took a deep breath, her heart racing. The words resonated within her, but she felt a wall of doubt still standing strong. "I just don't know how to move forward. I feel like I'm stuck in this cycle of grief." Lily leaned in closer, her voice soft yet firm. "You have to take the first step. It won't be easy, but you can't keep running from your past. You need to confront it to find closure. And that starts with forgiveness." Rachel looked down at her hands, the weight of Lily's words sinking in. It felt like a daunting task, one she wasn't sure she was ready for. But deep down, she knew that holding on to her anger was only hurting her more. As they talked, Rachel felt the walls around her heart begin to crack, letting in a sliver of light. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to confront her past without it consuming her. After their conversation, Rachel returned home feeling emotionally drained but strangely lighter. As she lay in bed that night, she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, asking for strength and guidance. It was the first time in months that she had reached out, and though her faith felt fragile, she sensed a flicker of something deep within her, a desire to find healing, to let go of the pain that had held her captive for so long. At that moment, Rachel realized that the journey ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to take the first step. It was time to face her past, to confront the memories that haunted her, and to begin the process of healing. And as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of peace wash over her, a quiet assurance that she was not alone in this fight. Chapter 5: The Turning Point. The days that followed Rachel's emotional breakdown were a blur of reflection and resolve. She had spent countless hours sorting through her mother's belongings, wrestling with the memories that haunted her. Each item she touched seemed to carry the weight of her unresolved feelings, but she was determined to confront her past rather than run from it. One rainy afternoon, as Rachel rummaged through an old trunk in the attic, she stumbled upon a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Her heart raced as she recognized the handwriting, her father's. She hesitated, a rush of anger and sadness flooding her, but curiosity won out. With trembling hands, she carefully untied the ribbon and began to read. The letters were filled with a mixture of longing and regret. Her father wrote about his struggles, his attempts to reach out, and the pain of leaving. He spoke of his love for Rachel and her mother, expressing a desire to be a better man, to make amends. The words poured out like a river, revealing the depth of his remorse. As Rachel read, a whirlwind of emotions engulfed her. Anger surged within her, but it was quickly followed by a profound sadness. She had spent so long resenting her father for his absence, but now she was confronted with the reality that he had been fighting his own battles. The letters painted a picture of a man torn between his demons and his love for his family. Tears streamed down Rachel's cheeks as she continued to read. With each letter, the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. She had always seen her father's departure as a betrayal, a choice that had left her feeling abandoned and unloved. But now, she was beginning to see the complexities of his situation. He had not just left. He had struggled, and in his struggle, he had lost his way. As she reached the final letter, Rachel's breath caught in her throat. It was a heartfelt plea for forgiveness, a hope that one day she would understand why he had left. The words resonated deeply within her, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of compassion for the man she had long blamed for her pain. Sitting in the attic, surrounded by memories of her childhood, Rachel felt an overwhelming sense of clarity wash over her. She realized that holding on to her anger was only hurting her. It was time to let go, to forgive, not for her father's sake, but for her own. She couldn't continue to carry the burden of resentment if she wanted to heal. With newfound determination, Rachel made her way downstairs, her heart racing with the weight of her decision. She picked up her phone and dialed Sam's number, her fingers trembling as she waited for him to answer. "Hey, Rachel. How's it going?" Sam's voice was warm and inviting. "I found something," Rachel said, her voice shaky. "I found letters from my dad. I think I need to talk about it." "Of course," Sam replied, his tone shifting to one of concern. "Do you want to meet up?" "Yes, please. I could really use a friend." They agreed to meet at the coffee shop, and as Rachel drove there, her mind raced with thoughts of her father. She felt a mix of anxiety and hope, unsure of what the future held but certain that she needed to take the step. When she arrived, Sam was already seated at their usual table, a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up and smiled, but his expression quickly turned serious as he noticed the turmoil in Rachel's eyes. "What's going on?" he asked gently. Rachel took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I found my father's letters. He wrote about his struggles and how much he loved us. It's complicated. I've been so angry at him for leaving, but now I see things differently." Sam nodded, encouraging her to continue. "That's a big realization, Rachel. How do you feel about it?" "I feel torn," she admitted. "I want to forgive him, but I don't know if I can. I've held on to this anger for so long. It's like I don't know who I am without it." "Forgiveness is a process," Sam said, his voice steady. "It doesn't mean you have to forget what happened or excuse his actions. It's about freeing yourself from the pain. You deserve to let go of that burden." Rachel nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I want to let go. I want to move forward, but I'm scared. What if he doesn't want to reconnect? What if he's still the same man who left?" "Then you'll deal with it," Sam replied, his tone firm but compassionate. "But you won't know until you try. You've already taken the first step by acknowledging your feelings. That's huge." Rachel felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. "You're right. I can't keep running from this. I need to reach out to him." As they talked, Rachel felt a sense of clarity wash over her. The fear that had paralyzed her for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a determination to face her past head-on. She realized that forgiveness was not just a gift for her father, but a gift for herself, a chance to reclaim her life and her happiness. That evening, as Rachel returned home, she felt a newfound sense of purpose. She sat down at her kitchen table, her heart racing as she pulled out her laptop. With trembling fingers, she began to type a message to her father, expressing her desire to reconnect and share her journey of healing. As she hit send, a wave of relief washed over her. It was a leap of faith, a step into the unknown, but Rachel felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The journey ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer afraid. In that moment, Rachel understood that healing was not a straight path, but a winding road filled with ups and downs. She was ready to face the challenges, to confront her past, and to embrace the possibility of a brighter future. The flicker of hope within her had transformed into a flame, and she was determined to nurture it as she moved forward on her journey of rebuilding. Chapter 6: Rebuilding. Rachel awoke the next morning with a sense of anticipation buzzing in her chest. The message she had sent to her father lingered in her mind, a tangible step toward healing that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. She had taken the plunge, and now all she could do was wait for a response. Determined to channel her nervous energy, Rachel decided to dive back into the renovations of her childhood home. She had spent the past few weeks transforming the space, and today she felt inspired to tackle the garden, a place that had once been a vibrant sanctuary for her mother. As she stepped outside, the sun greeted her with warmth, illuminating the overgrown weeds and tangled vines that had taken over the flower beds. Rachel knelt down and began to pull out the weeds, feeling the cool earth beneath her fingers. Each root she uprooted felt like a small victory, a symbol of her commitment to reclaiming her past. As she worked, memories of her mother flooded back. Rachel remembered the afternoons spent planting flowers, her mother's laughter ringing through the air as they tended to the garden together. It had been a place of joy, a space filled with love and nurturing. With every weed she pulled, Rachel felt a sense of connection to her mother, a reminder that she was still with her in spirit. Hours passed as Rachel lost herself in the rhythm of gardening. She envisioned the garden blooming again, filled with colorful flowers that would attract butterflies and birds. It was a metaphor for her own journey. She was nurturing her own growth, allowing herself to heal and thrive. Just as she was about to take a break, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Heart racing, Rachel pulled it out to see a message from her father. "Hi Rachel, I got your message. I'd love to talk. Can we meet? Asterisk asterisk." Rachel's heart soared at the thought of finally reconnecting. She quickly typed a response, suggesting a coffee shop in town where they could meet. After hitting send, she felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, but it also felt like stepping into the unknown. The days leading up to their meeting felt like an eternity. Rachel busied herself with the house and garden, pouring her heart into the renovations. Each brushstroke of paint and each flower she planted felt like a step toward reclaiming her life. But as the day approached, anxiety bubbled beneath the surface. What would she say? How would her father react? Would he truly want to reconnect, or was this just a fleeting moment of hope? When the day finally arrived, Rachel dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet comfortable outfit. She wanted to feel confident but also true to herself. As she made her way to the coffee shop, her heart raced with anticipation. The familiar scent of coffee wafted through the air as she entered, and her eyes scanned the room until they landed on her father, sitting at a small table in the corner. He looked older than she remembered, his hair graying and his face lined with the marks of time. But there was a warmth in his eyes that made her heart flutter with a mix of hope and apprehension. Taking a deep breath, Rachel approached the table, her palms sweaty but her resolve steady. "Hi, Dad," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rachel," he replied, his voice thick with emotion as he stood to embrace her. The hug felt awkward at first, but as they held each other, Rachel felt a flood of emotions wash over her. It was a moment of reconnection, a bridge built over years of pain and misunderstanding. They sat down, and for a moment, silence enveloped them. Rachel could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air, and she knew they needed to address the elephant in the room. "I've been reading your letters," Rachel began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "I never knew how much you struggled. I've held on to my anger for so long, but now, I see things differently." Her father's eyes widened with surprise, and he nodded slowly. "I'm glad you found them. I wrote those letters hoping one day you would understand. I never wanted to hurt you or your mother. I was fighting my own demons, and I didn't know how to ask for help." Rachel felt a mixture of sadness and compassion. It hurt, Dad. It hurt to feel abandoned. I didn't understand why you left, and I blamed you for everything. "I understand," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't change the past, but I want to make things right. I want to be a part of your life again, if you'll let me." Tears pricked at Rachel's eyes as she absorbed his words. It was a daunting proposition, but she felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. "I want that too, but it's going to take time. I need to work through my feelings." "Of course," he said, his expression earnest. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to rebuild our relationship, even if it's one small step at a time." As they talked, Rachel felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. They shared stories, laughter, and even moments of vulnerability. It was a slow process, but with each passing minute, Rachel felt a sense of connection growing between them, a bond that had been fractured but was now beginning to mend. After their meeting, Rachel returned home feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. In the following weeks, Rachel continued to work on the house and garden, pouring her heart into the renovations. She and her father began to communicate more regularly, sharing updates about their lives and slowly rebuilding their relationship. Each conversation brought them closer, and Rachel felt the anger and resentment that had once consumed her begin to fade. One afternoon, as she stood in the garden, planting new flowers, Rachel reflected on her journey. She had faced her past, confronted her fears, and opened her heart to the possibility of forgiveness. The garden was beginning to bloom, a vibrant tapestry of colors that mirrored the growth she was experiencing within herself. As she knelt in the dirt, Rachel whispered a prayer of gratitude. She felt her mother's presence in the gentle breeze, a reminder that love could transcend even the deepest pain. With each flower that blossomed, Rachel knew she was not just rebuilding her childhood home, she was rebuilding her life. And as she looked around at the beauty she was creating, Rachel understood that healing was a journey, not a destination. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she had the strength to face it head-on. With her father by her side and her heart open to new beginnings, Rachel felt a sense of peace settle within her, a promise of hope and renewal. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. The sun rose over Rachel's childhood home, casting a warm glow that illuminated the vibrant flowers blooming in the garden. It had been several months since she had first stepped through the front door, a time filled with challenges, revelations, and unexpected joy. Today, as Rachel stood at the threshold, she felt a profound sense of peace settle within her. The house had transformed from a place of pain and abandonment into a home filled with warmth and love. Each room reflected her journey, painted walls that whispered stories of hope, a garden bursting with color, and memories of laughter that echoed through the halls. Rachel had poured her heart into every corner, and now it felt alive, as if it were breathing alongside her. Today was particularly special. Rachel had invited her father over for a family dinner, a small but significant step in their journey of reconciliation. She had spent the day preparing a meal, filling the house with the comforting aromas of her mother's favorite recipes. As she set the table, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was their first official gathering as a family since they had begun to rebuild their relationship, and she wanted it to be perfect. When the doorbell rang, Rachel's heart raced. She took a deep breath and opened the door to find her father standing there, a bouquet of fresh flowers in hand. His smile was warm, and for the first time, she saw the glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Hi, Rachel," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "These are for you." "Thank you, Dad," she replied, accepting the flowers and feeling a swell of gratitude. "Come in." As they moved to the dining room, Rachel felt a sense of nervous anticipation. They sat down at the table, and as they began to eat, the conversation flowed easily. They shared stories, laughter, and even a few moments of vulnerability as they reminisced about the past. Rachel felt the walls between them continue to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of connection. "Rachel, I just want to say how proud I am of you," her father said, his voice sincere. "You've done an incredible job with this house and the garden. It's beautiful." "Thank you," Rachel replied, her heart swelling with pride. "It's been a journey, but I've learned so much about myself along the way." As the meal continued, Rachel felt a sense of healing wash over her. They talked about their hopes for the future, their dreams, and the lessons they had learned through their struggles. It was a conversation filled with honesty and openness, a stark contrast to the silence that had once defined their relationship. After dinner, Rachel suggested they take a walk in the garden. The evening air was cool and fragrant, and as they strolled among the blooming flowers, Rachel felt a sense of tranquility enveloping them. "Do you remember when we used to plant flowers together?" Rachel asked, glancing at her father. He smiled, his eyes filled with nostalgia. "I do. Your mother had a way of making everything feel magical. She loved that garden." Rachel nodded, her heart aching with the memory. "I wanted to bring it back to life for her. It feels like a tribute to everything she gave us." Her father's expression softened. "She would be so proud of you, Rachel. You've shown incredible strength and resilience." They paused by a patch of daisies, and Rachel felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness. I know it's a process, but I want you to know that I'm working on it. I want to let go of the anger I've held on to for so long." Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "That means the world to me. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you now. I want to be a part of your life." Rachel felt a sense of relief wash over her. "I want that too. It's going to take time, but I believe we can rebuild our relationship." As they stood together in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature, Rachel felt a sense of closure begin to settle in her heart. She had faced her past, confronted her fears, and taken steps toward healing. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. In the weeks that followed, Rachel and her father continued to spend time together, slowly rebuilding their relationship. They shared meals, worked in the garden, and even took family walks, each moment strengthening the bond between them. Rachel felt a sense of joy that she hadn't experienced in years, and with every passing day, the weight of her past grew lighter. One evening, as they stood in the garden, Rachel looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling above them. "You know, I used to think that I was alone in all of this," she said, her voice thoughtful. "But I've realized that I've never truly been alone. My mother's love is still with me, and I feel like she's cheering us on." Her father nodded, his expression filled with understanding. "I believe that too. She would want us to find happiness and healing." As they stood together, Rachel felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they had taken. She had learned that healing was not just about forgiving others, but also about forgiving herself. She had allowed herself to feel the pain, to confront her fears, and to embrace the possibility of love and connection. In the months that followed, Rachel continued to nurture her garden and her relationship with her father. The house became a home filled with laughter, love, and the promise of new beginnings. Rachel had rediscovered her passion for writing, pouring her heart into stories that reflected her journey of healing and resilience. As she stood in the garden one sunny afternoon, surrounded by blooming flowers and the laughter of children playing in the distance, Rachel realized that she was no longer defined by her past. She had reclaimed her life, her faith, and her sense of self. With a heart full of hope, Rachel whispered a prayer of gratitude into the warm breeze, knowing that she was on the path to a brighter future. She had faced her fears, embraced forgiveness, and opened her heart to the beauty of new beginnings. And as she looked around at the vibrant garden, she understood that life, like the flowers, could bloom anew even after the harshest winters. In that moment, Rachel felt truly free, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she was not alone. God had walked with her through the darkness, and now, with her father by her side and her heart open to love, she was ready to step boldly into the light.